Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
We like to mix things up here. So today, we're trying something a little different. We're diving into another podcast, like trying a new flavor.
Oh, I like where this is going.
We're checking out Courtroom Conversations from the classic Courtroom YouTube channel. They've got these awesome historical courtroom videos and really break down some wild cases.
Oh, I've seen that channel. They do some really great work. I'm excited to hear what you picked.
Absolutely. If you're into what we're talking about today, definitely go give them I'm Dylan Brooks Hamilton, by the way.
And I'm Susan Kelly Ashford.
So, Susan, we are diving into a case today that just captivated the nation back in 1994, the Susan Smith case.
Oh, wow. That one is definitely a story that sticks with you. A mother convicted of drowning her two young sons.
And she was recently denied parole after 30 years.
It's a case that keeps coming back up, doesn't it? There's just something about it that fascinates people.
I think it's the combination of the crime itself and just all the twists and turns that came after.
And those prison calls. Have you listened to those, Dylan? They're chillin'.
Oh, yeah. Those are some of the first things I dug into when we decided to cover this case. You get this really raw, unfiltered look into what she was thinking and doing while she was behind bars.
Exactly. And it's not just what she's saying, but when she's saying it, it's like this weird paradox.
What do you mean?
Well, just weeks before she gets in trouble for talking to the media, she's on these calls talking about media requests and even how she could maybe make money from her story.
You're kidding. It's almost like she wants to control the whole narrative.
That's exactly it. In one of the calls, she even says she threw away a letter from some big national news outlet. She says, quote, "Most of them want to give me a platform to tell my story." Like she's worried about being exploited.
But then at the same time, she's trying to figure out how to use the media to her advantage.
It's really strange. And the irony is that she's breaking prison rules by doing all this. Inmates aren't allowed to just chat with the media whenever they feel like it.
That's right. They need permission and everything, which makes those calls even more fascinating. Because she's on the phone with this filmmaker talking about a documentary.
Talking about some really heady stuff, too. Like, what was in the trunk of the car when it went into the water?
And her original plan to jump off a bridge with the boys, she claims she changed her mind because one of them woke up. Can you imagine hearing that conversation?
It's disturbing, for sure.
Yeah.
You're hearing these really dark details straight from the source, and she's talking about it so casually. It's like she's disconnected from the horror of what she did.
It's almost like she's compartmentalizing.
All right.
Separating the crime from her current situation and what she wants to get out of it.
It's hard to wrap your head around. But then we get to the parole hearing, and it's a complete 180. She's tearful, remorseful, begging for another chance.
I read that she said, "I know that what I did was horrible. I'm sorry that I put them through that. I wish I could take that back. I really do. I was just scared."
A powerful performance for sure. But after hearing those prison calls, it makes you wonder how much of that was genuine remorse and how much was just an act to try and get parole.
Is she trying to manipulate the parole board just like she was trying to manipulate the media?
It's a question that's hard to ignore, isn't it? Especially when you think about why the parole board ultimately denied her release. It all comes back to the crime and her behavior while she was locked up. Those were the reasons they gave for denying her parole.
So even with the tears and the apologies, the past is still haunting her.
It certainly seems that way. And it really makes you think about our obsession with true crime.
Like, why are we so drawn to these stories?
Exactly. Are we trying to understand these horrible acts, or is it just morbid curiosity?
It's a tough question.
Mm-hmm.
And with all the documentaries and podcasts out there, it feels like the line between wanting justice and just exploiting these tragedies is getting blurrier and blurrier.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's this weird incentive now to become infamous.
Like a twisted kind of fame.
Yeah. And it's making money, too, which just adds another layer of complexity to it all.
It makes you think about our responsibility as consumers of true crime.
Right. Definitely. Are we feeding into this by watching and listening to it all?
And what about the media? They have so much power in shaping how these cases are presented.
There's always that struggle between reporting the facts and sensationalizing things for views.
It's like in one of those prison calls, Smith says she doesn't want to talk to the media, but then she's planning a documentary.
Right. It's almost like she's conflicted. She wants to control the story, but doesn't want to seem eager to talk about it.
It all points to how complex she is. I mean, this isn't a simple case of good versus evil.
There are layers to her.
For sure.
For sure. On one hand, you have the grieving mother asking for forgiveness, but on the other, you have this manipulative person who is very aware of how she's perceived and maybe even sees a chance to profit from it all.
It's not just about whether her remorse is real or not. It's about realizing that someone can be capable of such a horrible act and still have these conflicting desires, these
Right.
contradictions.
And that's what makes it so hard to figure out her motivations.
We want easy answers. We want things to be black and white. But human behavior just isn't like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's messy, it's complicated, and we have to be okay with that.
Especially when we're talking about justice and trying to make sense of these awful crimes.
We have to remember that there are real people affected by these events, and they deserve to have their stories told too.
It all comes back to the power of stories, right? How we tell them, how we consume them. It all shapes how we understand things like justice and crime.
The Susan Smith case is a perfect example of that. It's full of twists and turns. It's a story that makes you question everything you think you know.
And it reminds us that the truth can be a lot more complicated than we might want it to be.
It's a reminder to really think critically about what we see and hear, especially with true crime. There's this pull toward the dark side of things, you know.
It's hard to look away sometimes. And this case really shows how easy it is to get caught up in the story and miss the bigger picture.
You see a grieving mother at the parole hearing, but then those prison calls show a whole other side to her. It makes you question everything.
It's easy to forget about the real victims in all of this.
Those two little boys. Their story gets lost in the media frenzy, and Smith trying to control how she's seen.
It's a good reminder that behind every headline, there are real lives that have been shattered.
And those stories deserve to be remembered. So what do you think are the biggest takeaways from all this, Dylan? What do you hope people listening will think about after this deep dive?
Well, I think it highlights the need to be really aware of how we consume media, how these stories are put together.
That's so important. We're bombarded with information from all sides.
And it's easy to get swept up in the drama and miss the nuances, the complexities.
We need to ask questions, challenge what we think we know, realize that there are different ways of looking at things.
And in the Susan Smith case specifically, it's about remembering the victims and the lasting impact of her actions.
While still trying to understand her character and what led her to do what she did, it's not about excusing her actions, but trying to make sense of this tragedy.
It's a lot to think about for sure. Well, Susan, this has been a fascinating, if a bit unsettling look into a case that keeps raising questions about justice of the media and just what it means to be human.
It really does make you think.
And if you're interested in hearing more about the Susan Smith case or want to check out some other captivating courtroom stories, I highly recommend Courtroom Conversations on the Classic Courtroom YouTube channel.
They've got a great collection of videos and some really in-depth analysis.
Definitely worth checking out. And hey, if you like this deep dive, why not head over to their channel and give them a like? They're doing some fantastic work, bringing history to life. Yeah. And with that, we wrap up our exploration of the Susan Smith case. Until next time, stay curious, keep questioning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.